Hey everybody, happy hump day. I'm James West, and I'm here with my good friend Todd Shapiro from Sirius XM Canada Talks 167 and the Todd Shapiro Show, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey,
round of applause for the co-host.
Let's keep it warm in studio.
All right.
Coldest day in Toronto on the record. On the record ever.
Since the beginning of time.
Since they measured.
I know. It's like the average temperature on today is like 8 degrees plus. And what is it today? -8 today?
More.
Minus
with the wind chill, you can't even go outside.
You know, it's still a month away till winter.
It's not fair because our skin isn't used to it. You need the skin to adapt to the paleness. You know, it can't shift overnight. I'm getting flaky.
I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know what the hell's going on, Todd.
Bad time to talk about global warming. I guess people get all up in arms when you use those suggestions.
Well, you know, it's so funny. I walked by my neighbor shoveling his driveway, and he says to me, and they say global warming's a thing, ha ha ha, and he laughs, and I'm thinking, oh, is this one of these guys who believes that global warming is a hoax, or is this one of these guys making fun of the guys who think that global warming is a hoax? And I just kind of walked by and went, ha ha ha, yeah, see you later, because I don't know, and I don't want to offend him. He's my neighbor. Is he going to throw snowballs at me or
That's
something?
a scary time.
It's a scary damn time.
Everything's a divide.
So today on the show, we've got New Wave Esports CEO Dan Mitri is here. He's going to talk about the business model of, the investment model of New Wave Esports and how he goes about making those selections. And then we're going to talk to Alan Brochstein a little later in the show. Alan is going to talk about a bunch of companies and why the earnings have been so underwhelming, and why there might be light at the end of the tunnel. So that's coming up.
In terms of cannabis companies.
In terms of cannabis companies. Todd and I are going to talk a little bit about Halo Labs, and we're also going to talk right now a little bit about one of Canada's corporate darlings, Canada Goose. And you've got the Canada Goose logo on your head. I bet you 2/3 of the inventory of Canada Goose sold in the last 2 years is in use today.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Canada Goose is an extraordinarily popular brand and popular all across the world now.
$800 parka.
But listen, they're the Canada Goose story is unbelievable. So, full disclosure, I don't work with the company. I'm not paid by the company. I have done some one-offs with the company before. I interviewed Mark Messier at a Harry Rosen event through Canada Goose.
Wow.
It was pretty, they dressed me up. It was kind of neat.
Oh, very cool.
But I'm also friends with the CEO, Danny Reese.
Okay.
Who is a brilliant man and a wonderful human being.
We'll have to get him on the show.
I mean, I don't know. He might be too busy for the show. But
well, it would be the first time I'd heard that. But sorry, you're an asshole. We're too busy.
No, you would never say that.
No, they think that. They say we're too busy, but they think this guy's an asshole. I'm not going on that show. All right, so Canada Goose took a real plunge. We're looking at the chart here. Is my NDI on? I'm sure that's what Don... It's not on. Well, tell you what, I'm looking at the chart. Dear audience, you're looking at nothing except for... Whoa, now you're looking at something. Yes.
Great work.
No. Yes. How about now, Donald?
That's in U.S.
There we go.
You got in U.S.
Okay, so this is the U.S. symbol. Half of our audience, actually the majority of our audience is U.S.
Good.
So this is Canada Goose trading on the NYSE, and we're going to zoom into a 1 month look because we've got this giant plunge here. And Todd, you had some insight as to what was the cause of that plunge on November 13th.
Yeah, so this was really interesting because they were up in pre-market.
Okay.
They had outperformed in their revenues this quarter.
Oh.
$60 million, and people were forecasting less. And they actually had a terrible quarter last quarter where they did. And if you look at their last quarter drop on their last earnings announcement, it went down something like, I think, 20%, 24%.
Okay.
So it's really interesting. So they outperformed. This was now all of a sudden people thought, my God, pre-market Canada Goose is back. But what happened?
Yeah, what happened?
There's some protests going on in Hong Kong, apparently, outside some of their stores. And I guess I would imagine there's a strong an Asian investor base within Canada Goose, and maybe that's influencing that. I'm not quite sure.
Interesting. We're looking at the chart again here. Here's where the last earnings came out, and you can see that the stock did take a similar dive to the one that it has today, but that also should suggest that the recovery will be forthcoming in the near term because the stock seems to hold up pretty well. Trades in a range between $25 and $44 for the last 3 months. Let's go out to the year-to-date look and, let's see, what the hell, yes.
I mean, at what point, like on this show, do you ever say to people, well, that looks like a buy to me? Like, are you allowed saying that?
Yeah, I absolutely give my opinion. Yeah. Usually I don't say it looks like a buy to me. I say I'm going to buy that sucker.
I think I'm going to buy Canada Goose maybe just before close today. I really do think that. I might do it right here on the show.
Actually, feel free. Actually, that has been done before.
I mean, I bought it. I bought it on their and again, I'm not paid. I'm not the nothing.
This is you squandering your own money.
Yes. I think there's potentially a really good buy right now, and I'm honestly thinking about $3.58. If it goes down a little bit more, I like that 12 to 15% range.
So you
for very good companies.
You follow the story regularly.
I love the Canada Goose
because
story.
You know Danny Ray. I mean, does he even give you inside information? No, I'm sure he doesn't.
He's not even close. Danny Reese is, like I said, he's a wonderful man, and he's such an altruistic and philanthropic. I can't say the word.
Philanthropic.
Thank you. Jeez, I only work in radio. Okay.
Right. Well, this is obviously this isn't radio. And that's why you're off today.
I'll stick to altruism. Okay. And he works with an organization called the Polar Bear International Organization,
established by Canada Goose, is a charitable organization.
He's just one of their biggest donators for sure.
Perfect.
And it's a really interesting story to find out what's going on with climate change and they follow and track polar bears, and they're discussing in terms of what's happening with their environment. As I don't think they're quite an endangered species, but they're monitoring that situation very closely.
Sure. Well, that's good. That's good.
I think it's a buy. I don't know. What do I know?
Well, hey, fill your boots.
Are you going to buy it? You want to buy it with me?
I am not in the market right now.
Okay.
And I am, in fact, out of the market.
Cash.
I'm in cash almost entirely, and I'm going all the way to cash.
And why is that, James?
I'll tell you why, Todd, is because I think that there's a tremendous market crash imminent. I think that we are about to enter a recession that's going to make 2008 look like a cakewalk.
See, you're really close to all this, and the more I
some would say too close.
Well, you are too close,
right?
And listen, I'm very careful how I talk about this stuff because obviously I work with a bunch of different companies that I want to do very well, and I'm invested in those companies, so obviously I would want them to do well, and I'm paid by certain companies, so I would want them to do well. But I do fear the economy. And the one thing that I always try to speak to with people with maybe my limited knowledge in the capital markets, but one that I think is quite in depth, is if you invest in good companies, you'll be okay, in my opinion. And just be very, very careful with the companies that are out, because there's thousands of companies. I mean, are there 40,000? Someone once told me there are 40,000 CSE traded companies. Is that true?
No. There's 40,000 publicly traded companies globally.
Globally. That's what it was. My apologies.
Yeah. There's 23,000 in the U.S.
Okay, so that's.
I think that number is low, honestly.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. Actually, we had Oscar Joffrey here from Core Connects, who runs a private company secondary exchange, and he had all those numbers right on the tip of his tongue. And I interviewed him, and you'd think I retained any of that. Unfortunately, I didn't. But
did you see that Inside Bill's Brain, by the way, documentary?
No.
On Netflix?
Bill who?
Bill Gates.
Oh, Bill Gates. They opened up his brain?
It's unbelievable. It's a computer chip in there. It's
what
fascinating.
I knew it. He's a cyborg. Damn him. That explains a lot.
He can read 150 words. He can read 150 pages in a minute. And he can retain 90% of that information.
No.
That's where I got that from.
Really?
He's just like, boop, boop,
well, that's, he has my utmost admiration because I read 150 pages in about 4 years and I retain none of it.
Reading is tough, I find. And social media takes you away from being able to focus because it's so structured for sort of this ADHD headline kind of...
I think that you're right there, and I agree. I think that the social media universe has bred an enhanced collective ADHD that makes us bored. Like, have you noticed? It used to be, we said, there's no point making a video over 10 minutes because nobody will watch it. That went down to 5. Now it's down to 2.5. And now TikTok, it's down to 15 seconds. And it's amazing to me how many videos I actually scroll right past after 1 second on TikTok. Because it's like, you know what you like, you know what, and the mind has just become so conditioned to like absorbing a content scenario and immediately classifying it as to desirable or not, that it has completely undermined thinking and reading and absorbing information in a more meaningful way. I couldn't agree more.
There was that case study.
Now it's down to 2.5, and now TikTok, it's down to 15. I don't know what's going on.
That was unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm repeating myself.
Are we in the are we in the chamber now?
That was the delayed loop that just came up on my screen. I don't know what's going on.
Oh my God, we're really living in that. Oh no!
See, even the computer wants to interrupt you if you're talking to it.
It's the Matrix. Oh,
exactly. Is this real?
I don't know.
Am I in the Matrix? Am I out of the Matrix?
I don't know what's going on anymore.
Anyways,
there was that viral link story that went across last year about how Facebook people were sharing a completely fabricated story just based on its headline. Something like 60% of the time, they weren't even reading the story. They were just reading the headline, and in the story was something completely different. And that people really just share headlines. It's very scary.
I'll tell you. So I had a gig working with the Financial Post, and I was publishing video content with articles and stuff, and they were experimenting with digital content. This is just back in 2013. Anyways, so I come across this video on YouTube, and it's a video of President Trump saying that he's going to build a wall on the Canadian border, and that Canada's going to pay for it. And so I find this video, I watch it a few times, I write a big article, put it in the context of now he's going to build a wall down there. I kind of pull some tongue in cheek and say, well, actually, we'll help him build the wall, and yes, we'll gladly pay for it because, you know, there are reasons for that. Exactly. Anyways, it turns out that this was one of the precursors to the deepfake video movement. Somebody had actually very technically edited this video and made it look like he had said this. And it actually got published in the Financial Post that morning, before I was the one who actually was suddenly, people wrote to me and said, James, that's a fake. You got hoaxed. And so I called the FP and they pulled it. And but I was like one of the first guys to fall prey to that.
But good for you for admitting that, because that's how, listen, you're an extremely intelligent guy, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass here, James. I like coming on the show, dude, and I like you, and James gives me a lot of great advice off air and everything. But
here's your $50.
Thank you, sir. I need it. It's a testament to what they can do graphically and how they can put these videos together. Even now with the story about James Dean going to have a starring role in a movie, that came out last week. Did you see that?
No.
There's a new movie being released, and then they got the likes, the likeliness. What do you call it? My mind's not working.
Yeah.
The likeness.
You need some.
I need some
microdose of Midas magic mushrooms. Midas mushrooms. Did I just create a brand for myself? Jesus.
And James Dean will be re-starring in a brand new movie based on what they can do with CG. It's unreal. It's like, so at what, back to the simulation, like,
how can a guy star in a new movie posthumously? That's incredible.
Well, they did do it in one of the Star Wars movies. I'm not a big Star Wars guy, so they have done it and tested this before. But and Will Smith has a new movie where he plays Will Smith from his old age, when he's younger, and they recreate that image. So we can stay young forever, is what I'm saying.
Well, at least graphically.
Yes, yeah.
I certainly know physically that's not possible, having spent some time working on a farm lately. Anyways, I lost all communication with the mothership here, so I don't know what the hell's going on, but Oh, I do know what's going on. The mothership is talking to me again. It's the voice of God, damn it. Alan Brochstein is here for a quick conversation about what's going on in the cannabis space. I'm joined now by Alan Brochstein, publisher of 420Invest.com. Alan, welcome back.
Hey, it's good to be here, James.
Alan, earnings seasons in the cannabis space is amongst us. We've seen reports from Cronos Group. Curaleaf, I believe, is reporting this week. Whose reports have you read, and which ones do you like versus which ones don't you like?
Oh, wow. They've all been pretty bad so far. They're scary. The scheduled ones and the unscheduled ones, like organograms. So, no, I think if you're looking for good reports, you'll probably find that in the U.S. actually. But so we'll see. I'm looking forward to GTIs next week, for instance. I think that'll be a good report. But it's been tough. The Canadian market is really hitting a wall right now, ahead of Cannabis 2.0, and then as well the hemp market in the United States has stagnated or declined depending on who you are.
Sure. My understanding is that there's a real surplus of hemp already, and a lot of it won't be sold, which kind of is going to, do you think that's going to put a real damper on the price of extracted CBD going forward and the associated products by extension?
No, I really don't. I think a lot of farmers grew hemp and they didn't really have a place to sell it. This is a big problem. As a matter of fact, Kushco announced an initiative this week where they're helping to broker those deals. But the trouble's even bigger than that. The real issue is the FDA hasn't weighed in yet. They were supposed to weigh in a while ago, and now some people are saying they won't weigh in until the end of 2020, but hopefully a little bit sooner. And as long as the FDA isn't weighing in on the regulatory status of ingestible CBD, I think it's going to create some real issues with the larger retailers that are entering the space, the CVS's and Walgreens of the world. So something to look forward to, I think, that regulatory clarity. But until then, so the hemp farmers, they have nowhere to sell their stuff, unfortunately. There's a lot of operators out there that have entered the space that are being hyper competitive as they try to get their name out there. And but this is in the natural food product, the Whole Foods of the world, but not necessarily Whole Foods, but some smaller stores, gas stations also, things like that. But really what's going to move the market is when CVS can sell ingestibles. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I saw, interestingly, some companies are benefiting from their lower share price. Cronos Group reported a net income of $787 million on revenue of $12.2 million, I believe it was, and that's just a function of revaluing the warrant held by Altria. But I thought that was interesting because at first blush it looks like a real positive, and in some respects to existing shareholders who are not Altria it is, but where else are the bright spots among the earnings? Even Charlotte's Web reported a decrease in earnings this quarter.
Right. So, I mean, this is a good point and why people need to be careful about net income. I called out Afria's report 2 quarters ago for the same reason, that there was a derivative liability that caused their quote-unquote earnings. And interestingly, on the Tilray call yesterday, they discussed, they still haven't done their filing, so it's not easy to check this, but they discussed that they're not making earnout payments on their acquisition of 2 acquisitions that they made. One was a greenhouse in Leamington, speaking of Leamington greenhouses, and the other was the acquisition of Manitoba Harvest. So they benefit because they kind of paid too much for their acquisitions, and so they get to take that money back, and it counts as net income. So, Tilray's gross margins picked up a little bit, which was good to see. But earnings is few and far between. Like I said, stay tuned for GTI next week. I think that's going to be a good one, James. But so far, earnings hasn't been the story, that's for sure.
That's right. That's right. So we've sort of adopted a position that, the companies that are at least making enough money to drive, continued operations and don't need to go to the capital markets, those are the ones that might survive, and the ones that need to rely on capital funding are very likely to not survive. Do you sort of concur with that assessment?
Yeah, I think you're being probably a little bit too extreme. The company surviving versus the stock price imploding, these are two different things. So yes, I do agree that there's some haves and have-nots out there, and investors are starting to figure that out. It's funny because we've seen two companies go into receivership, Ascent and then Dionamed Brands. So there is that possibility that some companies won't be able to raise capital at any price and will end up in receivership or bankruptcy. But for the most part, I think it's probably going to play out a little bit differently than that. And you're going to see some companies that have strong balance sheets and good cash flow actually take market share, be able to do better deals than their rivals. So they're going to succeed over time. They'll weather the storm and they'll succeed. But then you'll see some other companies that just do some really crappy financing. Let me give you a great example. Cannabis. Oh my God, I'm sure you watched that, but they did the rights offering at a 70 or 75% discount to their price, drove the stock all the way down to that price, and you'll probably see more of that. Desperate companies taking desperate measures to keep the lights on.
Well, desperate times call for desperate measures, as they say in Hollywood. But I don't think that those are necessarily the right moves, although I guess in some instances where you have obligations, you don't really have a choice. You have to take what money you can get. But then we're seeing this real bifurcation, like the companies like Green Thumb Industries, TrueLeaf, CureLeaf, companies with strong growing sales channels where their performance is not yet what we would like to see, but they certainly aren't reliant on future capital funding to keep growing. So those are the companies that I really like. Going back to Tilray for a moment, Tilray had that $450 million debenture with the investor. Do you see that as representing any kind of a threat or risk to other investors in Tilray at this point?
So, it's funny, a lot of the call yesterday was about when they're going to get to break even and the type of, do they have enough cash? Will they need more capital? And the company said they have about $300 million in unencumbered assets that they can get some debt out of, but they already have this debt. So they may be able to do that, but I would think that equity shareholders will not like that. They already have a lot of debt, net debt. And so until their cash flow is positive, they should be really careful. I'd love to see Tilray just bite the bullet, issue some equity. The story there is playing out very nicely, actually, and the valuation, while it's not a giveaway, it's making sense. It's pulled back almost to its IPO price from a year and change ago, July, almost a year and a half ago. So, but there is a problem, and the analysts were dancing around with the CFO and the CEO about their assumptions that go into this break even, and whether or not you want to think they'll do it or not, I think everybody would agree that they don't have a big margin of safety. So just go bite the bullet, Tilray, issue some stock, and move forward.
Yeah. Okay. So then, with the Cannabis 2.0 coming in Canada, do you think that the advent of 2.0 is going to sort of staunch the bleeding that we're seeing in the Canadian equities, or do you think that much like the actual recreational legalization in Canada, it constitutes a catalyst for more selling?
Yeah, I sure would like to think it's going to be good. We've all been looking forward to it, but we're also used to looking forward to things and being disappointed. So more important is getting more stores open in Ontario, but 2.0 will be interesting. I think this has been one of the big deficiencies of Canadian legalization, that if they want to compete with the black market, they have to offer people what they want. And there's a lot of reasons why they're not. But one of them is they're not allowed to offer edibles. And so, in typical Canadian regulatory fashion, the edibles are package capped at 10 milligrams, which is insane. And so it's going to make these things expensive. I hope that changes rather quickly. In the United States, those package caps range from 50 to 100 milligrams, for example. And so hopefully when they see that the world's not coming to an end, they'll relax that regulatory constraint. I think positively, there are a lot of people out there that don't mind buying for novelty, 2 5-milligram edibles in a 10-milligram package. And so I would suspect that vape pens will be extremely popular despite the concern about vaping right now. And then the edibles, and we could have a whole discussion about beverages. I look forward, these companies say they have these great beverages. United States, no market's ever seen any sort of interest in beverages that's anything but trivial. So that's not a category I'm super excited about, but vape pens for sure, and edibles even with those limits on them.
Yeah, gummies and brownies for sure. I'm with you on the beverages. Personally, I've actually sampled some cannabis products, actually quite a number of them, and I'm not really a recreational cannabis user anymore. I have very precious little cerebral throughput as it is. That seems to be deteriorating with age, and I certainly don't want to encumber that with weed. But even as an effusive recreational user in my youth, the idea of drinking cannabis doesn't make a lot of sense because the cannabis thing is it was a social something to smoke and share, and it's part of the drinking culture, but you don't want to do them together because they're two separate things. So I think a lot of the expectation around that is going to result in disappointment as well. So I'm with you there. And the vapes, I think that the vapes are going to do just fine. So then if you were going to pick one company right now to turn around at the end of tax loss selling season in December, call it, which company would you suspect to be the most investment worthy, if you don't mind putting your name on that?
Oh, wow. So, I've probably made this mistake before. Generally, I don't like to do this anyway. It's something I share all the time with 420Investor subscribers. And I think probably if you asked me that a few months ago, I would have stupidly said CanTrust or something like that. So I'm pretty reluctant to say this is my one pick. But I will say, I think Organigram has really proven itself to be one of the best executors with a very simple model, and the stock's been imploded now, basically beating it back like everything else. And so we haven't seen the report that will come out at the end of the month to find out more detail than just the disappointment in the revenue this quarter. But I'd say there's history in Organigram being beaten up and coming back to life.
That's true. All right, Alan, well, your input is very much appreciated as per usual, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thanks for joining me today.
All right, take care, James.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing to our YouTube channel and clicking on the little notifications bell. If you're interested in getting monthly actionable investment ideas in the cannabis space to your inbox, subscribe to the newsletter at MidasLetter.com. We're back, and as usual, Alan Brochstein is a font of information. There's obviously a great deal of negativity in the cannabis space, given the valuations, and but there's exceptions to the rule. And one of our sponsors, Halo Labs, might be considered an exception to the rule because they have revenue and they have a pretty, remarkable track record of growing their customer base. Now, full disclosure, we received sponsorship from Halo Labs for the bulk of 2019. Todd here, my co-host, is also a compensated.
Yes, I am.
They're a sponsor of Todd's show. So while we are going to discuss Halo in a positive manner, we do caution you that we are biased and you should regard this conversation as advertising. That being said, wow, what a fucking company!
Yeah, no, listen, I can't give financial advice, you know that, but
I can. Todd, don't take any wooden nickels. There you go.
I won't. And I really enjoy working with this team. Much like you, James, you selectively work with companies that you believe in.
Yeah.
And I know we believe in Kieran. I was joking with Kieran because we want to start a podcast, which is something we're discussing internally.
Right.
And if we do, we're going to launch it pretty soon. So we just have a couple of other things we're going to ensure to make sure we can do that. Because Kieran, the CEO, Kieran Sidhu, is not only just an incredible CEO, and his background from exits in other spaces before the cannabis space speaks to itself. He was involved in the poker space, etc. But Kieran Sidhu is a big advocate of the plant, and he's someone who really understands this flower and understands it more than a lot of the CEOs that just like to come on and pretend they know because their team told them what to talk about.
Right.
Kieran comes from a very empathetic and compassionate point of view where he wants to get a message out there and beyond just the company message, but the company itself continues to grow. It's cash strong.
Yeah.
He's flying down to Africa to hopefully close this Lesotho deal. Lesotho, I said it right?
Lesotho, yeah. Yeah, so they do have that deal with Buffalo, which is co-founded by a very powerful woman in Lesotho, very prominent business figure there. Anyways, let's take a look at this chart, and this chart is what can get us excited about Halo. This kind of bounce in the share price is like, wow, I didn't realize it was doing that.
It has been performing unreal this week, and perhaps the story is getting out about what they're doing. People must be excited for their earnings call, which is tomorrow. And I think people obviously are seeing this potential that is going on, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And as well, Kieran has been on his Twitter accounts, Kieran Sidhu CEO, just giving his careful updates, of course, and talking about the excitement within the company.
Have you been using the dab tabs?
I'm not a dab tab guy, but I think that there's a lot of profitability within the dab tabs and their margins there. So that's despite the vape crisis, there's still a lot of opportunity with the dab tabs.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see a lot of the regulations going into vaping, which Trump talked about a couple of days ago, and that's where also the company is positioned very well, knowing that they have had these independent studies done to verify the types of ingredients that go into the vaping and the dab tabs that are way, way different than the stuff we are hearing the stories about, which is causing the crisis.
You bet. That vitamin E acetate seems to be like, that's the one everybody's pointing at, but it's the mainstream media is so focused on absolutes. And the interesting thing about the vape crisis, because as a formerly enthusiastic vapor, I was super concerned about what's going on, because at the same time this was happening, I was getting some respiratory issues, and so I thought, geez. So I really started to research everything, and it was actually through the company that manufactures the dab tabs, and Michael, his last name.
The Shatterizer.
Well, no, the guy who makes the dab tabs. Elo Labs, I believe. No, not Elo Labs, but Elo, the company in Portland that makes the actual dab tabs. Michael, his last name escapes me, who created them. We had a great discussion about, because he's, this is a guy who's bought every single vape device out there and taken it apart to its constituent elements and analyzed what's inside it, because they're trying to build this superior product. Anyways, he told me, and I learned more from him than all of the other stuff I read online, was that it's not just vitamin E acetate, though yes, that is definitely a culprit, but he says, there's some of these devices, the way they're constructed, are releasing heavy metals into the vapor stream, including chromium and I think what was some of the other ones? I can't remember what some of the other, but some real nasty heavy metals were being released into the vape stream because of the way these things were put together and what they were made out of. So to me, it's very dangerous to say we found the culprit, and as long as it doesn't have this in it, you're okay. Putting anything into your lungs that is not air is going to cause problems, because your lungs were only made for air. That being said, we obviously consume products that are not necessarily the best for our health, and among the least harmful in terms of vape products, I found the vaporizer and the dab tab to be one of the easiest to regulate the quantity of the product that you're doing. Anyways, I am going off on a tangent, and I love the dab tab, and I still have the Shatterizer at home, but I'm out of dab tabs.
Well, you got to get some dab tabs then, James.
Well, I'm going to California.
Yep, and they're in California, they're in Oregon, they're in Nevada, and we'll see what happens with Africa. I know Kieran's flying down there, so Halo Labs, definitely one, as you said, it's biasly here, but on people's radar right now. The volume is massive. They're on the NEO exchange. There's even a little NEO billboard campaign going on right now, and Kieran's face is featured on it, and think of all the companies on the NEO exchange. So he's a very, listen, Kieran is a very likable guy, a very transparent and honest guy.
Yeah.
And I think people, I've said this before, really also invest not only in companies, but in companies' management teams.
Yeah, you bet. We're going to take a look now at the sector more broadly. Obviously, they're not all performing like Halo Labs, though They
really are going against what almost any company in the cannabis space is doing right now. Like it's pretty special to see what's going on. Sorry, I'd say that as well. Because the space is, where's the bottom?
Okay, so we're looking at the 4 indexes right now. Yes, thank you, God. Midas Letter Large Cap Index at this hour is down 2.67%, down below 6,000 again, so flirting with that ultra low level. The low of all time was hit on October 1st, down at 57.86. We start to get down to that level. Do not jump out of windows. We're going to start to seal the windows in the ivory towers of Bay Street, because there will be some more plummeting objects.
You really believe this?
Well, I'm kind of joking.
No, but you worry about markets and their sort of the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, the cannabis market in particular is characterized now by a prolonged and relentless sell-off since April of this year. The reason for that is there are too many cheap shares whose escrow agreements are now starting to expire, and so the holders of those shares are getting the ability to sell them in the presence of a fear event. So if you get shares in the midst of a fear event, when you look at a chart, your first instinct is to get what you can and blow them all out right now, which compounds the fear factor.
Sure.
So yeah,
keeps it going
exactly.
Down. Do all of your listening audience know what the escrow means? And how that works? And I only say that because it's something I learned only about a year and a half ago, and especially now doing this raise that I'm doing for a company called Light Holland and being the co-CEO on it, I really understand it now much, much further in terms of this is a company I'll want to take public one day. And escrow is basically means management can't, from what I understand of it, sorry, I asked the question and I'm answering it.
Yes.
You answer it.
Well, an escrow agreement is a way to modulate the rate at which stock can be sold by insiders and early investors. So the standard issue escrow agreement, that is the least you can do with founder shares by the exchange, is your typical 3-year escrow agreement where, for example, 15% of the escrowed shares will be released upon the first day of trading.
10%.
And then 10% thereafter until the last 15% at 6-month intervals.
Yes.
So that takes you to 3 years.
3 years, okay.
So you can mess with that formula, but and the escrow provision can be a false sense of security for investors because, for example, if I issue 100 million shares and 15 million of those shares can be sold by insiders who paid 10 cents for them on the first day of trading when everybody else is in at 50 cents, there is no reason to consider the escrow agreement a favorable development for an investor who paid 50 cents. So this is why there are different flavors of escrow agreement. And a voluntary escrow agreement by management where they say, we will not sell a single share until we turn EBITDA positive.
We saw that in True Leave, sort of. They talked about a voluntary lockup in that company.
So there's many cases where there's the standard issue exchange mandated escrow agreement, and then management does a voluntary additional escrow agreement. There are situations where there's only a voluntary escrow agreement. There's every flavor of escrow agreement under the sun. But generally, an escrow agreement should give a shareholder at least the awareness that there is an escrow structure in place, and now it's incumbent upon you to go and understand that escrow structure, because the shares that can be released at cheaper prices are the shares that are competing with you for exit at a higher price.
Sure. With that being said, you can track all this stuff. There's reporting from companies, and you have to file on CEDAR, and you have to show when insiders sell.
Yes.
So to help yourself become a little bit more of a sophisticated investor, look for that. And generally, if you see management selling shares, you're kind of going, uh-oh, something wrong with the company here. At other times, you might appreciate and respect that there's been a lot of sweat equity, their salaries are low because that will be disclosed as well. Maybe they need a little bit of cash for living if they've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, have some opportunity to sell now, or had opportunity for years and hadn't done it. And at times people do need to be liquid. So I think there's different ways to look at it. It's not, to me, it's not always a negative thing that there are founder shares.
No, definitely not.
And if founder shares are much lower than a share price, I don't think that's a negative thing as well. There's a lot of risk involved still at early stages.
Yeah.
There are founder checks that are still being written. So when you start to look at the multiples of millions that they will hold in sometimes of these shares, it's still a very significant check that people are writing to get them. So, I would say that, and this is from my studying of them, that at the end of the day, just follow the story, understand the story, and then kind of gauge from there based on the company performance, if they're selling or not, and what that means to you.
Well, and at the risk of sounding like we're giving financial advice.
Oh God, I can't give financial advice. Yeah, this is just what I've studied.
So we caveat all this with, if you're a retail investor, you need to take the advice of a registered investment advisor in your jurisdiction and not listen to us, because we are market participants who are conflicted through ownership of shares and also compensation by issuers.
Yeah.
So that being said,
oh God, yeah, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, well, it's that's, to me, it's very important that's the main thing that the audience needs to understand when they're listening to a couple of guys talk who are in the market.
Yes.
Is that we have different values per se, because our interests are obviously in making sure that we get compensated and we make money alongside the companies that we're trying to help.
Yeah, but we're not talking about specific companies here. We're talking about basically every company the way it started.
Read that disclaimer. That's all you need to do is read the disclaimer. Anyways.
Okay.
Going back to, so escrow agreements, good thing to have, especially escrow agreements that are voluntary and additive. You can find out what escrow agreements are in place by going to CEDAR. Now, we started that conversation after we started talking about the indexes. So going back to the indexes here, just because we do this every day, we're going to take a quick look at the constituents on the large cap index. And there's the picture. 2 stocks are up, the rest are down. Who is contrary to the trend on the large cap index? Curaleaf is having another up day. They had an up day yesterday. They're up 2%. And Green Thumb Industries up 2%. Both of those are companies that are U.S. multi-state operators who have significant revenue from significant sales and are not reliant on capital markets to continue their growth trajectory. This is the thing about the great United States, is that unlike Canada, where we're still contemplating our navels in deciding, what we're going to allow in our edibles and vapes. This market has been alive and well in many states in the United States, California foremost amongst them. So these companies are really the proving ground. The interesting thing, as Alan was pointing out in his segment, is that the obsession there's a certain portion of the audience who's obsessed with the idea that cannabis beverages are going to be huge. And apart from sports performance drinks augmented with CBD to ameliorate muscle pain, I don't see the recreational market going whole hog into recreational drinks anytime soon.
I think it is headed that way, though. And the reason being is I actually think this every time I go into a bar. Every time. You go into a bar, and I go into bars sometimes. I don't know if you know that about me, James.
But sometimes?
But if you think about what you see, this big display of marketing, okay? Because there are big companies, paying big money to make sure that they're featured and displayed, especially in the busiest bars in the most urban of centers. And I think that, we know what alcohol and its sort of effects on you are, let's be honest. And the more effort that goes into with these companies, the ones with capital right now, who are doing the research and hopefully, making some good products, THC and CBD infused, we're going to see this big push. You're going to walk into bars one day, and I really believe you're going to see that same type of look, but they're cannabis-based drinks. I really believe that. And I don't know when we're going to see it in the States before Canada, but we will see that. That is that is coming without a doubt. And when you look for these companies, the ones that are doing the extraction, the one that are combining or white labeling and helping out there's going to be a lot of great products out there for people, and certain products that are branded the right ways with the money behind them are the ones that are going to exceed. There
will certainly be an abundance of those products out there. With that, I agree 100%. And I'd love to be proven wrong. Let's see the market take up drinkable THC.
What about drinkable psilocybin? You think
drinkable psilocybin?
Will we see that one day?
Mushrooms taste so good in their native format. I can't imagine that happening.
How would you know?
Well, I like to encrust my mushrooms with chocolates because they taste like foul. I remember the first time eating actual mushrooms and thinking, "Are you kidding me? This tastes this shitty." Mind you, I was a teenager and was at a party and I was drunk, and boy did I get high. I actually spent the night in jail. Because what had happened was these guys were at this big outdoor party in this friend of mine's backyard. His parents came home and called the cops.
By the way, I've never taken financial advice from you for sure.
Well, there you go.
No, go on.
But the parents came home and called the cops on this party, and everybody went stampeding in every which direction. And the cops decided to scare a bunch of us kids into a little tough love. So they put us all in jail cells, and they didn't know that we had all been this was our first time trying mushrooms.
God.
So here we all are in the same jail, and we're all on shrooms, and we're all shrieking with laughter because it's just hilarious, because we know that the cops are just doing this to us for a lark, and it was just a riot.
This is right out of like Superbad or something. It's a total movie scene. That's unreal.
I needed to be hospitalized the next day, not due to overdose from mushrooms, because I laughed so hard my stomach muscles were killing me. My cheeks were sore from laughing so hard, and that made me the cops made me a lifelong mushroom aficionado.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you to our wonderful officers.
Well, exactly. So, yeah, you can have a lot of fun
I think
with
we'll
mushrooms.
see stuff like that in about 5 to 10 years. I really believe that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research that still has to go into psilocybin.
Actually, one of my favorite bands in the whole world is playing at the Danforth Music Hall on December the 6th. The Rio Statics will be taking the stage. And so if you'd like to go, I'd like to buy you and your partner a ticket.
December when?
6th.
Well, I'll have to look into
That's
it.
my birthday. That's the only way I can remember that date. Yes.
Okay, yeah, we'll go down.
Yeah, okay. So anyways, so shrooms this is interesting because there is now, I've counted about 6 companies that are raising money for a psilocybin-related investment opportunity. Red Light is among them. You're the co-CEO of Red Light. And what can you tell me about Red Light at this point?
I'm still careful what to say publicly. I mean, we're looking for accredited investors at this point to inquire more. First Republic is doing the raise. Anthony Durkatz and his team, we've talked about that. And I'm just going to be careful of what to say on a show. But there is a deck out there if you want to inquire. I can tell you that this is an immediate revenue-based company. It's not about research. There is a really good forecast here and a really good plan in place with an amazing team. And I know I'm kind of like not saying it. I'm not talking about what's right in the deck, and I'm just doing that strategically because we already have a lot of interest. We've already been verbally committed at a significant amount of this $3.5 million raise at 6 cents. And we're sort of finding our strategic investors because we want people to kind of all rise together with the belief in this company and what we're doing.
So where is this company going to, am I stepping over the line by asking where you're going to be based?
Out of the Netherlands.
Out of the Netherlands.
It's called Red Light Holland.
Right, Red Light Holland. That's appropriate. The source of the original Red Light District. So I've talked to a whole bunch of CEOs that are doing different things with psilocybin, and uniformly they're basing their offering around research into mental health remedies for different mental health issues. So your product is recreational in nature?
It would be both recreational and medicinal in nature.
And the psilocybin is legal in Holland?
Yes.
Oh,
there is. If you do your research, there is definitely something that is very legal within the Netherlands space. So that's one thing that we're exploring.
Interesting. Can you imagine psilocybin's on the store of, I guess it would be the Ontario psilocybin store in 5 years?
Yeah. No one's going to know how to spell it or research it. That's the only issue.
That's a good point.
But I think, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came out and talked about her belief of decriminalizing mushrooms and
really?
And psilocybin. And by the way, and I don't mind saying this, I rarely agree with anything she says, but this one I do.
She's a Democratic person in the States.
She's a big voice, and she really speaks to the youth and the culture. And I've said it right here on this show, and mark my words, this is going to happen. The next big wave of protests is against Big Pharma and their prescribed meds. That is coming. I'm predicting that. If I can't give financial advice, but I can give emotional advice.
You can predict the future all you want here. Nobody's going to listen to us.
and we want these more natural forms. And psilocybin. I've done so much research. I had a former 2-time Stanley Cup winning champion on my show the other day on Sirius XM, Dan Carcillo. And he was a bit of a goon. They nicknamed him the car bomb because he could explode at any given moment. He was just one of the guys, one of those types of players. And he's talking.
Did you call him a goon during your show?
No, I didn't know. I don't want to set him off,
Because that would make him explode.
But he's very open about, very sadly in his life, about being encouraged to be sort of like this best of the bad type of hockey player without a lot of the NHL really looking to the effects of CTE and post-game depression and things like this. And I don't want to compare it to PTSD, but there is this post-game depression that comes with a lot of players. He also very, very sadly had suffered, was a victim of sexual abuse when he was younger, growing up in the hockey system. Talks very openly about that. And he said he was suicidal. This is his quote on my show, and that he went and someone recommended to him mushroom therapy, and he did it, and it changed his life and gave him that reset that we've spoke about on this show before, and literally not only changed his life but saved his life, changed his entire perspective on life. And it's this is a heartfelt, beautiful story. And if that doesn't want to make you explore the space more than anything, then I don't know what would.
Yeah, no, I think, it's interesting. My personal belief is that psilocybin and the responsible use of psilocybin, in other words, I'm not going to eat 3 grams of magic mushrooms and then fly a jet full of passengers across the planet. I will, however, consume 1 gram of dried magic mushrooms and go to a concert on my birthday, potentially. And the experience will be enhanced by being under the influence of mushrooms. Enhanced in what way, you might say? I don't know what the laws are regarding advocacy of consumption of a Schedule III drug, but I can tell you that the experience is uniformly uplifting, and the next day is without the painful heavy effects of alcohol poisoning, and you feel like you really learned something about yourself and the others with whom you share a mushroom experience. So I'm at a loss to comprehend how they ever became illegal in the first place.
Well, and listen, at the end of the day, we it's all perception. Like everything in this world is about perception and then greed. And the perception is, why are certain drugs, never going to come to the forefront, or maybe only now coming to the forefront, where prescribed ones are, which are like killing people, billions of dollars of lawsuits being settled, and then the Sackler family having to claim bankruptcy, which is probably just a way of shifting their money somewhere else to not pay the victims of the opioid crisis. And alcohol itself, and listen, I own 5% of a stake in an independent craft brewery, and I'm the first guy to say you should never have more than a couple of beers. Like really, it's not great for you, I'm sorry to say. It's not great for your body, it's not great for your calories, it's not too much drinking. We all know the results of that.
Your memory gets hooped, Dave.
Oh.
I can attest to that.
So back to moderation. It's about moderation, and I think we'll see that within these different types of drugs. I really do believe that.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. We're going to turn our attention back to the cannabis space for a little bit here. I wanted to point out that the sentiment continues to be negative across the space here. The indexes continue to lose ground as we go into the close of the day, with the worst performer being the small cap cannabis space. And we'll see who is the big performers there, who are the poor performers. So Oxley is holding fast at 75 cents. It's been range bound there for going on 2 years now, I guess. 75 cents to $1.20 is the range it trades in. Let's see, actually, let's take a look at Oxley here. We'll pull up a chart. Make sure I'm not talking through my arse. The 5-year look on Oxley. Yeah, okay, so there's the bottom line, is it's been trading in this range here since January 2017, after it went and changed its name to Oxley from
pretty stable chart.
Yeah, not bad. Not bad. That's the kind of stability you want to see in the chart that's showing your heart rate, but not necessarily your investments.
At least it's not going down too much, you know?
That's true. Okay, so the top performer in the cannabis space today in the small caps is actually Chiron Life Sciences, former sponsor. They're up 5.68%, last at 93 cents. Balance Growworks, hard on their heels, up 1.94% to 315, followed by Origin House is up 0.5% to 437. So after that, the tape is all red. So that's just, there you go. The sentiment continues to be negative.
Are Cannabis earnings tomorrow?
I don't know if it's tomorrow. I know it is this week.
I believe it's tomorrow.
Yeah, they're all coming out this week.
I think this is, the sector has traditionally gone with Canopy. Is that fair to say?
Yes, Canopy is definitely the sector leader, for sure.
And
Canopy or Tilray, and sometimes they diverge.
Yes, and I think depending on what these earnings show, it's, this is a very important week for people who are invested in the cannabis space.
Well, and if we were to take our cue from the sentiment being demonstrated in the indices, it doesn't look good. Well, so we had, even Charlotte's Web, who reported 2 cents a share earnings, net income per quarter last quarter, came out this quarter and reported a loss of $0.01 per share. Organogram came out and warned on the quarter that it was going to be less revenue and less EBITDA than the third quarter, which was negative. Of course, Hexo is now disappearing into the rearview mirror.
Oh, man.
An absolute train wreck of a report there. So, the outlook is uniformly negative across the entire sector from companies that were supposed to be the leaders in the space. So, at some point, we know these companies, well, most of them aren't worth nothing, but some of them are, in fact, to have now declared, or rather sought bankruptcy protection. Don't know how many more that's going to happen to, but so, the question becomes which ones will survive and become winners.
And not giving financial advice, but I would look for the ones, cash is king right now. And if I were investing, I would research for companies that are cash strong, because there's a lot of M&A opportunities now. The ones with cash can kind of scoop up from a lot of companies that really will need to be scooped up at these very low prices.
Right. Well, the interesting phenomenon that's happening in cannabis is even, before April of this year came along, there was tons of cash in all the companies. So all of the companies were spending, I'm not going to say like drunken sailors because that sounds like a negative, but they were spending, very aggressively in the belief that there was going to be continued venture or investment capital available from investors, because 3 months ago you couldn't see this level of collapse coming unless of course you were prescient and or you were just really, you really had a handle on all these cheap shares coming out.
People often ask me, why do I want to go into the capital markets? Why do I want to be the CEO of a company at some point, which now is happening, co-CEO anyway. And I sort of steal a line from Michelle Obama when President Obama got elected, and she sort of had a seat at the big table right now. And they said, are you comfortable? How do you feel about that? And I might be paraphrasing here, but she said, you learn pretty quickly they're not too dissimilar from you. And in this case, I would run a company way better than half these individuals, because I'm sorry to say, there was a lot of misspending of other people's money. And that's what the money came in quick and it was going out just as quick. And it really is unfortunate, because when you're sitting there with a big pile of cash, you carefully plan. This is the long haul. And companies were, I really think they were abusing the investor money that was coming in a lot of situations. And I think it's unfortunate, because you never want to abuse an investor's money. You want to carefully plan, and I just don't know if a lot of these cannabis companies did. Sure.
Well, it's interesting in that it looked like a race to dominate the world. And we certainly saw that between, for example, Aurora and Canopy, and Aphria to a slightly lesser degree, but Aphria is all over the map as well. And who else is really? Tilray's very international at this point. Kronos Group, less so, more US focused. But a lot of the early players became, very obsessed with this idea that they had to build market share and presence globally as fast as possible to prevent their competitors from gaining that market share and that exposure. And to that degree, in a environment where your bankers are saying, here's $250 million, go spend it and we'll raise you some more, the bankers are happy because they're making fees left, right, and center. And everybody thinks that the party is never going to end. And the party always comes to an end. The music always stops, and there's never enough chairs for everybody when the music stops. And that's really the essence of capital markets. You're going to lay your money down, you're going to bet, you're going to get in the game, and you're betting in the belief that you're going to have a chair when the music stops. You're going to see it coming.
And I think you nailed it. And this is what I always try to inform people with my limited experience in business, but my great deal of experience in media, which is it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I've been doing media on a very high level now for 2 decades. And I've never tried to do the sprint thing, the shocking thing. We were a bit of a shock jock back in the day, but I was sort of paid to be that way. But I've never done the quick win so I could get in the news and then it just falters like a viral thing. It's a steady race. It's stay in there, be consistent, work very hard, keep getting your name out there. Why do Coca-Cola and McDonald's still constantly advertise? Because they constantly get their name out there.
Cheap breakfast.
Well, and a great breakfast, Coca-Cola. But
all right.
Anyway.
Todd, thanks for joining me today. We're going to be live from our studio in Los Angeles, California on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week. In fact, on Tuesday, I believe it is, we're going to be live from the Lowell Cannabis Cafe in Hollywood. And so that's going to be a really interesting week. We hope to see you then. Thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to.